Good morning, guys. Welcome to the Grow Global Monday Mastermind, and we've have a great topic here for you to go over with this NAR lawsuit that's been heavy on everybody's mind lately. A lot of new things have come out. A lot of new comments have come out. People are figuring out their strategy on it. So we thought we'd take this time because people asked for it to go over what some of the top agents are doing with their scripts and how they're talking about it with their buyers and sellers. So I think this is going to be a great topic and topic conversation. Now, going through this, if you have any questions that come up, because we've got some great speakers here that are going to go over different ideas, put it in the chat. And in the chat, we'll come back to you when we get to the question and answer session, and we will start answering some of those questions. And then toward the end, we'll also have time if you want to personally ask those questions on the webinar. You can do that as well. So let's jump right into this. And we've got four great agents that know what they're doing in the real estate industry. It's going to talk to us today. We've got Alex Montagano, we've got Tracy Lovig, Laura Komperda, and Jamie Parker. We're going to go over some of the things that they're doing. So first, let's start off with Alex. Welcome, Alex. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. Yeah, fire away on any questions you have. We kind of talk about what our team's doing and then, where that has us, centered in our city and in our market.
Yeah, so on the NAR lawsuit, let's talk about the what are you doing to talk to your buyers? What are the kind of scripts that you're using with your buyers to let them know what's going on, how you're playing, what you're wanting point to get across to them, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So how we look at things and look, the conversations that you have with your buyers are different on all across all fronts, simply because the buyer that I'm going to talk to that I've worked with three times buying their fourth house is a lot different and a lot easier than the conversation that a newer agent's going to have with call it an internet lead or a sign call or anything like that. And so one of the things we've talked quite a bit about is actually slowing down the process of kind of running in that first showing and trying to be the speed to lead industry that we've grown so quickly to become, and treat the buyer side of this comparable to you would with a listing appointment. So if a seller were to call you and say, "Hey, Rob, can you come over to my house? I think you want to list, I think I might want to interview you to list my property." You wouldn't say, "I can be there immediately and here's a contract, please sign it," right? So what you would do is you would schedule a time to do it. You would talk about the value that you provide as an agent. I would refer to that as your unique value proposition, and we would handle that from the standpoint of a seller getting to know you and then
Yes.
making a common connection in terms of why they would want to work with you. And I think what we've done in the industry over the last 4 years, essentially since the COVID market, is we've incentivized agents to go as fast as possible. And the fastest agent, whether they're providing the greatest amount of value or any of that, is the one who's been the most rewarded. If you could be the first offer in, you could typically buy the property. I've bought a handful of investments myself, being the first showing, blocking all the other showings, and shutting things
Right.
down with a decent offer quickly. So what we advise our agents to do and what we're working on now is, that first showing we're talking about, can you have it at a coffee shop opposed to meeting at a property? And then you could talk about who you are as an agent, who you work for, who the brokerage is, what cutting edge technology you have, and really try to understand what that consumer's looking for versus simply being somebody that meets somebody at a house and opens a door. So while you're doing that, you're solidifying a relationship with the client, and then you can educate them during that time period of what that the NAR lawsuit means, what the documents mean. Additionally, EXP's launched, it's called a single showing document. Some of you guys may have seen it, but our brokerage has put this out. And basically what it says is it gives a timestamp of how long the relationship between the buyer and the agent is. It's a one-time showing deal, and it has a space on there for the amount of compensation that you can receive based on the showing. But then after that showing, if there's no relationship between the buyer and the agent, that contract expires. And if that consumer wants to go find another agent, they're welcome to do that. And if the agent doesn't want to work with the buyer, they don't have to do it at that point either. So those are just a couple of things that we're doing right now to start. But again, the big thing that we've talked about, if you're an agent who doesn't know what their unique value proposition is, I would recommend that you get with your mentor, your sponsor, a colleague, a friend in the business, and say, if you were to hire me, why would you hire me? And let them tell you those things. And typically they're going to say things like, ah, you're really nice and you care and you work hard. No, everybody does that. Tell me really, though, if you were going to hire me, why would you really hire me? And when you drill down into those things, it allows you to build your tool belt for the presentation that you're going to be giving to referral partners, to strangers, and it helps you have then a differentiator versus all the other agents that survive in the industry. And those are the things that I think on the surface today are the most important things that you can be doing. Um, in addition to taking this conversation head on with your clients, like we have some folks that are like, man, I'm going to wait. I'm not ready to have these conversations, or I don't want to get these docs signed today. And the reality is if you can just take this face first now, the faster you evolve into working this into your day to day, if you're not using it, or if you're unsure how to use it, you might as well fail forward on April 15th, because by the time this is in place and there is no going back, if you're not prepared, you're way too far behind. And agents
Exactly.
like me and Laura and everybody else that are already doing this, we're just going to leave you in the dust. And we're going to steal the clients from you because you're not willing to do what you need to do to make them your client. And I think it's important to recognize, guys, like we are salespeople, we do sell real estate. It is our job to get contracts signed. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to survive. And those are the things that we're talking about internally.
I remember back 20 years ago when I used to own Remax offices, we had a little different take on helping agents grow their business. And we would teach them, we had a special class, and very few agents did this, by the way. We would teach them to bring buyers into the office, sit them in the conference room, and do a whole buyer presentation to them, right? We had a big screen TV on the wall, and they would do a slideshow, a buyer presentation. They would look up some properties to figure out what they wanted, and they would go through a list of all the different things that they do as a buyer's agent to benefit them. And so bring in value, and they would get the buyer's agent's agreement signed. And so coming fast forward, now everybody's going to be forced to do this because of this lawsuit. So it's going to be interesting. Now, another thing, you mentioned something about telling them what the value is. There's a lot of lists out there with hundreds of things that a buyer's agent does in order to provide value to the buyer. So I think getting those lists and incorporating a bunch of things that you're doing for the client.
Yeah, I think those lists, Rob, are super important. I mean, look, we don't have a great perception in our industry from a professionalism perspective, and some of that is deserved with how some of the people who lack the professionalism conduct themselves. And oftentimes, if you talk to somebody that's unhappy with their agent, they may say something like, well, I actually found the house, and then they negotiated for me like they just wanted a paycheck. And the reality is they don't know how we're paid. They don't know what licensure we have to pay for, what systems we have to have, and then all the things that we do that fall in the transaction, but then also outside of the transaction. And one of our core values on my team is beyond the transaction. And so what are the things that you're doing after a transaction closes that a client gets from you free of charge for nothing, simply because they have that bonded relationship with you as an agent? And those are things that, look, I think you need to be comfortable saying, hey, look, I know you think all I do is this, but actually, here's the laundry list of things that we do for you guys because we're passionate about what we do. We're unbelievably high level of professionals, and we do this at the best of level. These are the things that you need to know. And look, that is going to be something that the traditional agent's not going to sit down with the client and do. They're going to
Exactly.
say, what do you like? What's your dog's name? Blah, blah, blah. And then on and on they go. Have fun, little Fluffy, and let's go look at some houses. Because traditionally, that agent needs to generate a fee. They need to generate a fee fast. But if you can put the fee on the back burner and focus on education, relationship, being a professional, dressing the part, showing up for the part, you're going to earn more business because people are going to look at you and go, "Holy smokes, wow, this is different than anybody else."
Exactly. And that's what we need in the industry is more professionalism overall. We've seen that kind of in some agents. They're not being trained to be that way from the beginning. So it actually is going to shape things up a little bit. Well, let's go over to Tracy. Tracy,
Yes, sir.
talk a little bit about what you're doing with the buyer side and what you're talking to them about.
Okay. Well, I have always I have a 3-ring binder that I give them that has a presentation in it. And we go through, it has the guide that we have in our marketplace about the process, how real estate works. We go through all that. I talk to them right up front. Even if somebody's already bought a house, 9 times out of 10, they don't remember how you got paid.
Right.
So you have to have that conversation. And then you've got to take them through why. We talk about what we're going to be doing when we're looking at houses, what we need to think about. Are you thinking about, oh, this new shiny house looks really great, but it's an hour from everything you do after work hours, right? It's an hour, maybe 5 minutes from work, but it's an hour from your family. It's an hour from your church. It's an hour from your doctors. All these things that people don't always think about that we have to bring into the mix and help them think about to make the best decision for them. I have a commitment that I make to them, as far as what all I'm going to be doing for them, looking for houses off market, the pre-foreclosures, through our exclusives, through workplace, all those kind of things, in addition to the MLS and finding things that way, and looking at new construction for them, and make sure they understand that even if it's a FISBO or a new construction, I can still help them with that. That they don't want to buy a property unrepresented. This is a legal contract. It is a huge investment, and you can't just fly by the seat of your pants. You'll get yourself in trouble. You'll lose money. Right. There's contract dates in there that have to be followed. I let them know, that as I'm committing to them, I'm asking them to commit to me. We're only going to look at houses that fit your parameters. If anything changes, you let me know so that we adjust everything. You're going to get pre-qualified and pre-approved before we go look at properties, and why that's important and how we need that to get the offer going. Just, all those little things, and then all the things that's being done behind the scenes. I actually have an email I send out that winds up probably 2 pages long if you print it out. As soon as we get a contract, there's one for the buyer, one for the seller, but it's all about next steps and what each next step is. And it has a timeline at the bottom. And one of the things I always talk to them about is these timelines are critically important. This is what protects your investment, your earnest money. So you're working every day. You've got your family. This is not your full-time job. This is my full-time job. And I want you to have this, but I'm the one that's following up on these and keeping you abreast of these. And you can expect to hear from me 2 to 3 times a week or more. I'm going to be your new BFF, but by the time we're done, you're going to be like, please leave me alone. I've had enough, right? Let's talk once a month. It's those kind of things that to me make a difference and let them understand they've got somebody in their corner.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also with this new ruling coming down, that may change how people use Zillow, because Zillow is wanting a certain type of response time for the leads that they're sending out. And Tony says that you're an expert on Zillow leads. So how are you going to handle
Not
Zillow?
Anymore. I won't go away from that.
Good for you. How did you handle Zillow leads, or how would you see handling Zillow leads with this type of thing going on?
See, that's one reason I walked away. They don't want you
Really?
having those conversations till after you meet with them. And, I would go meet with these people and they'd have an agent who was out of town, or they, had an agent they were working with or whatever. And I'm not going to waste my time doing that anymore. If I were still working with it, it would be, I would explain to them up front with all the changes that have been made over the phone. They've got to sign the new form that EXP gave us, committing for at least that one day or that one property or 2 properties.
Yes, using that one-time showing.
I think, look, I'm a huge Zillow spender for our team. We spend almost $11,000 a month. It's a big portion of our business. I think the challenge, and I think we can all play the scenario out in our head, right? The nightmare scenario is somebody wants to go see the house today, and you say, "Can you please sign this document? It's you got to sign it by law." I don't have access to be able to sign that, but I can sign it if you bring it to the house, right? So then you meet them there, and they look at the document, and they say, "I'm not going to sign this," and you say, "Well, this is the law. I can't let you in a house." And it's 2024, guys. Like, there's a lot of loose cannons out there. People are crazy. And some people are the best people in the world. And some people will sign that and happily be willing to support you or whatever. But imagine being parked in a driveway, parked in, not be able to get out and having somebody tell you he's not going to sign a document. What are you supposed to do? And so I think this goes back to the idea of like slowing down the process. I mean, look, I have a Zillow contract till August, so I'm in this for the foreseeable future. But
Our
the
state
reality,
broker, our state broker went over this the other day, Alex, and she
yeah,
said you show up at the property, you've got two forms. You've got the one-time showing where you're just a customer, or you've got the buyer's brokerage to be a client. And you say, I need you to sign one of these. It's totally up to you. If you sign this one, I can let you in the door. You can see the property. If you want me to help you write a contract, I can do that. The other one I have is for you to be my client. I can take you through the house. I can point out things from my expertise, and I can help make suggestions for negotiating an offer on this if you want to move forward.
love that.
90% of my clients sign this. But if you just say it that way, just that simple,
That's
just
really good.
for
That
this
is a
one
good,
house.
that's a good way to do it, because now you're not just saying sign this, you're saying here's your options, right?
Right.
Good.
She
I
did.
think,
I've got it on video.
Yeah.
She
I
did a
think,
great job with it.
well, the other thing too, I mean, look, if you've ever answered an online lead or a sign call, look, you're not sitting there waiting for that to happen. You're a little caught off guard. You're trying to scramble to get the information. Things are going fast. To try to get a document signed in that point before they meet you at a house can tend to be a bit of a challenge. I
Yep.
love the idea of maybe providing a little bit of information and saying, when I meet you at the property, there's some stuff that I'll go over. There'll be a document you need to sign. I'll bring it with me and I'll meet you at the house. And I love that you're giving somebody an option. You're not saying the option isn't if you don't, you can't. It's
Yeah.
just pick which one you want to do. And
Right.
I think that's the first time I've heard the option deal with that. And I think that's excellent.
Hey, Tracy, can you get us that video and we can upload it into the resources for Grow Global?
Yes, sir, I can.
That'll be perfect. Hey, let's bring Laura on and get a different perspective from Laura on what she's doing with agreements.
I just tie them up and rope them down.
Some people can get away with that.
No, truthfully, I haven't had a ton of conversation with buyers or sellers yet. Interestingly, I did an open house. Oh, well, I did Saturday and Sunday, but yesterday at the open house, I had a buyer talking about it who
Yep.
does not have a realtor. And he was like, okay, so I have to, this was his conversation, which was interesting. He said, I have to budget in then the money to pay you then, right? So now I'm going to need the down payment, the closing costs, and now I've got to budget in the money to pay you. So it's interesting, everyone's got such a different perspective and thought on it, and the conversation went something like, I said, potentially, I said, buyer agency has always been negotiable. And our goal is still going to be to have the seller cover that cost. If they don't, there is a chance that you're going to have to cover it. So he was kind of okay with it. I don't think he was happy, because he's talking about maybe an additional $10,000 out of his pocket. But it was kind of interesting that someone had that perspective. But what Alex was talking about really is, and Tracy both, is where it's at really is becoming more professional, which many of the agents really need to. And even myself, I wasn't as good as Tracy that I always sat down with a nice big 3-ring binder and had this formal presentation. Most of my business is repeat and referral after all these years. So it's kind of easy with me and my clients, However, when you do meet someone at an open house or you get an online lead or something, you do have to sit down really and go through your value before you ask them to sign a document. I actually typed out some scripts. So if at some point I'm going over some of these scripts, I'm going to let everyone know that's watching. You don't have to write it down. I typed them out. What I've been doing really is educating myself I've been listening to different webinars and talks and hearing what other agents are saying, and things that I liked. I typed them out. I tweaked it to make it for myself, but I will upload that into the chat later. So I have a buyer script in there. I've got multiple seller scripts in there. So I will upload that into the chat later for everyone so they can take a look at it and use it, don't use it, tweak it, whatever you want to do. But I think for the buyer side, what I keep hearing, as always, it's showing our value.
Mm-hmm.
Really sitting down and letting them know what we're going to do. One of the things that someone had talked about was saying to say to them that, hey, I only work with X amount of buyers at a time. And the reason that I do that is because I'm working with people that have committed to exclusively working with me. And then I'm working with them. And it takes so much time to do all the things I need to do. And here's the long laundry list. And here's all the things I'm going to do that are above and beyond what most agents are going to do. It's very time consuming. So I'm only willing to do it with so many buyers at a time. It really makes it more exclusive. And it makes it more like, oh, wait, hold on. Do you have time to work with me then?
Yeah.
People want the best doctor that they can ever have, the best surgeon if they're having their knee done. They want the best knee surgeon in their area, and they wait for that surgeon until his schedule opens up. So I think we have to be a little bit more exclusive and make it so that if I have room, I only take on first, then I'm going to go to bat for you, and I'm going to do everything, and I'm going to help you achieve your real estate goals. And then once you show that value, it's really an easy, natural progression to have them sign the exclusive buyer broker agreement.
See, I like that take where you're saying I only have a limited number of slots or clients I can take on at a time in order to give them the full service that they deserve and get the best out of the transaction. So if you would like to take one of those, I'd like to take you on as a client.
And I've been around 4 decades, so I've seen a lot of ups and downs, and people freak out every time there's a change.
Oh yeah.
This is a big change. And yet I think, I'm kind of a Pollyanna. I look at the glass half full all the time. And I think it's a good change though, because I think it's going to raise the bar again in our industry, and it's going to weed out the ones that aren't willing to step it up, and be the professional, because we see it all the time on the other end, don't we, everybody? The agents, you can tell if they're not stepping up and doing their job because you're doing their job all the time.
Right.
Doing the buy too.
Another thing that came up in your conversation is that the misperception that the consumers have on what's going on. So I think we're going to have a period of time where we're going to be educating the buyers and the sellers. But that's been our job for decades, is education. We educate buyers when the prices are spiking. We educate the sellers when the prices are dropping. We having to educate them on what the market's going on. And for a minute, they don't quite get it. And then finally they understand, as enough of us are teaching them what's going on. Because if they perceive that they've got to come up with the money in order to buy a house, that extra money, in their mind, they got to wait longer, right? And if they don't tell you that, or if you don't address it up front without them asking, then they just perceive that they got to wait. But if you address that in your conversation on, hey, here's how you can do it. Here's how we're going to work that. Here's how we're going to negotiate that. Then that can help alleviate that and move the process forward.
Right. There was a couple things that liked, and it's all on that education thing. They said the key is to educate, don't defend.
Yes.
So
yeah.
That we are going to get paid from here or there, or however it's going to happen. And the other thing someone said was, definition of an objection is an unanswered question in the mind of the prospect.
Correct. Yeah.
Answer the questions up front and they'll sign the document.
Yep.
And one of the things NAR has done for us that I don't know everybody knows is you can take the accredited buyer's representation course for free.
Oh, really?
Year right now. So you can go to NAR and sign up for that and take it for free because of this situation going on. They're allowing that.
That's pretty cool. I like that. So let's go to seller side. Let's see, what are we talking about on the seller side? So Alex, what are y'all doing with the seller side conversation? How is that different now? What are y'all saying to talk to the sellers?
Yeah, we pushed hard for full fee brokerage as long as I've run a team, and there's occasional time and a place where you take less or you do less or anything like that. And so there's a couple avenues we've taken with this. First being, we're recommending 6% plus our transaction fee as it's always been, simply because it's the fiduciary duty of a listing agent to draw as much attraction to a property to drive the best offer. And that's not necessarily just the highest, but it's the best with regards to the terms and the process of the transaction. And look, if you offer zero and the buyer can't pay, you may be impacting negatively the amount of buyers that come in the door or the final net proceed at the end of the day. So our recommendation is going to be status quo, 6% as we've always worked off of. Now, when I got in the business, commissions were 7%, then they went to 6.5%, now they're at 6%, now they're at 5%. They've been, we took a listing the other day as a team at 4.5%. It makes you puke, but that's the reality of it. And the team member of mine and I had the conversation. He's like, how do we split this fee? And what we've seen some folks do is they would take their 3% as a listing side, and they would then pay out 1.25% and say the rest is up to you to figure out as an agent. And that's certainly an option that you can do. But look, I've always thought it's the fiduciary duty of the listing side to work to get as much interest in the property as possible. And that is packaged with the amount of commission that you're offering the buyer's representation. Because in turn, it does make the transaction easier to execute. If Laura's buyer thinks they got to come up with 10 grand, they may look at a property differently. And, at that point, they may say, oh, if I have to come up with the money, I don't see as much value in that property. And so now, we're in a position where we're recommending that our sellers pay the full fee, and that we've always done, and we educate them as to why we recommend doing that.
I love that. Yeah. So Tracy, what are you doing on the listing side, on the seller side?
Same thing. I was on a listing appointment the day after this announcement got made, and the gentleman was wanting cash offers, which I work with a couple of different investors. Unfortunately, he had already gone to Open Door and had a great offer from Open Door. And on the following Monday, when we were talking, he said, I really want you to list my house and I'll pay you 2%. I said, well, okay, so if you pay the 2% on the listing side, what are you willing to pay on the buyer side? And he goes, well, with this new lawsuit, I don't want to pay anything. And so we had a discussion about the lawsuit and what that does. I know this gentleman's got to get his house sold and move to Florida for a family issue. And I was just very blunt. And I told him, I said, listen, Jim, I really like you and I would love to list your house. Obviously, that's how I make my living. But when you are not willing to pay anything for buyer's compensation in this price point, I'm not going to be able to get people in to see your house. The buyers don't have the money to pay the commission, the down payment, and the closing cost. So I would be doing you a disservice to take this listing if you're not willing to offer any buyer's compensation. So I just declined the listing. He sold to Open Door. He got good money from Open Door. But he thanked me for my honesty. I mean, I would just be spinning my wheels and wasting time.
Yes.
Well, you would be on the phone nonstop all the time answering all the questions. I mean, we had an agent in town. She's a managing broker of an independent, and she listed a property with no commission. And the agent on my team came into my office and said, hey, Alex, I just want to bring this to your attention. It's a Zillow lead. How would you handle this? And I picked up the phone and I called the agent. And she said, Alex, you got to do what you got to do. And I said, well, if we go look at your property, we are going to write in that the seller pays the 3% buyer agency fee. And I know it says you're not offering it, but you can counter us because it's a term of the contract. Alex, you got to do what you got to do. You got to do what you got to do. I said, do me this. Can you tell me why your seller thought this was a good idea? He's done this for a long time. So then I started looking at the property history. I called the team member who called the client, and I just said, look, this isn't a transaction you want to get involved with a seller like this. You'll give every step of the way and you'll never make it home. So do you love the house? Are you married to the house? Do you need the house? Or are you just trying to buy a real estate investment? I want an investment. This is not the avenue to go. So a lot of this narrative that we're going to accumulate from this process, like that guy should have sold to Open Door. It was the easiest thing that he needed. And if he needed to get away the fastest, by all means, get out of Dodge and give it away.
Right.
But if you're trying to work in the open market, folks like that who have all the answers, they're typically the worst sellers to work with. And I think, this is a sidetrack, but guys, we've always looked at sellers, interviewing sellers, go get sellers, go get sellers. And what they tell you as you build a business is you get a choice of who you want to do business with. It's the choice of the seller that you want to take on. It's the choice of the buyer. And so if you're on the phone with somebody and they're like, I'm not going to pay you, or I can't pay you, or I'm not willing to do these things, as agents, we now have a choice of what we choose to do. And so you get to say, I'm not going to list your property for 2% because it's not going to work. And I don't work that way anymore. And that's part of the professionalism, is taking back control and ownership of our own decision. Whereas so often if somebody dropped a buyer in your lap today, it's, when can you see the house? It's the first thing you do. And then in the wheel you go. Will you get a pre-approval? Yeah, I'll do it when I'm ready to buy. All right, sounds good. Let's go. I'll meet you there. And on you go. So this option of choice, Tracy, where you're saying, I'm not interested in taking that, it's great for you, and it's great for our industry.
I think that's a great point, because we don't need to take every listing, especially if you figure out how much time you're going to spend on that listing, because they're not participating in their own rescue, right? They're going to make it difficult, and you're going to spend a lot of time on something that may not ever get sold, which you could have gone out and found somebody else to work with and have a better transaction. So, Laura, tell us about the seller side. What are you putting together for the sellers on how you're going to talk to them?
Yeah, well, so far I haven't had any of my listings even question it, so that's
Right.
been good. However, I am preparing, because
Have they even brought up the lawsuit at all, or just not at all?
one or two have maybe mentioned it briefly, and because I'm so casual, I'm like, it's all going to shake itself out later. It'll all work itself out. Let's just get a thing going now. And they're like, oh, okay, whenever, so
Well,
again.
and that's a great point. If you make a point of bringing it up and talking a lot about it, they might not even care. So
No.
That's a great point. Just move on. And if they do ask questions and want to know, educate them, of course. But if it's not a big deal, keep going.
That's why we need the scripts. So that's why I've been on, and like I said, I've typed these up. So one of the things, someone was, when they were role playing, it was on a Tom Ferry event, I think, or something like that. But one of the things I do is I do not discuss commission ever on the phone. Someone asked me what my commission is. I always say it's negotiable. Well, first I say, I don't know, I haven't seen your house yet. But commissions are always negotiable. So once we get together, I'll answer all of your questions. Because if you answer the question, if that's their first question and you answer it on the phone, you're dead in the water. So to me, I think if I answer it, I'm not getting the listing anyway. So I won't answer that question. I've never answered it on the phone, ever.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point, because you could say, well, commission depends on the condition of the house and then how fast you want to get it sold.
Right. And then, because then once you're there, it's the same thing with the buyer presentation. Once you're there and you've shown your value and you've done the net sheet, and they say, well, I heard about this thing. I don't have to pay the buyer agent anymore, so I don't want to pay the buyer's agent. I'm only going to pay you. And then you say, well, hey, other than commission, is there anything else of a concern? No. Okay. All right. Well, so we went through the net, and you're happy with the net of what you're going to get out of your house. So obviously you have a net sheet already created and done for them. Yeah, I'm happy with that net. That's fine. And then you say, okay, well, great. Because, 97% of the sellers, they want the best price up front for their home. They don't want to haggle for it later. So if I can get you the best price right now, like I'm showing you on this net sheet, isn't that the most important thing to you? We know that. And I think you will probably agree, because you bought your house this way also 5 years ago with me, that most buyers are going to negotiate the commission at some point in the deal. Why don't we move forward with the buyer fee in there already, so we're not negotiating, haggling later, because it's already been calculated in your net. And if they're happy with that net, then what's left for them to complain about and disagree on?
That's right.
It's just one script.
Now I have a question. Has anybody thought about or ran into the conversation of hey, the other homes have sold for this price, and you have to say, well, that price had a buyer's compensation built into it. If you don't want to offer it, that adjusts the comparables in the marketplace. Has anyone come up with that?
I haven't yet.
Because that could be a neat way to combat with people who are trying to price their home. Okay, so we need to reduce the price of your house because the other comparables have it built in.
Yes, I've had that conversation with two listings I'm about to get, and they both agreed to pay the buyer's compensation up front because I just say it's always been in there throughout the history of us selling homes. It's in there now. So any comps that I give you that are before this takes place and we have actual closings happening where we can determine if it's in there or not, you're taking a 3% discount on your listing. Not only that, you're losing 67% of the market who, when they had statistics pulled, were saying they would not purchase a home without a real estate agent and could not afford to pay. So when they hear that they're losing that big of an audience of buyers and knowing that it's just going to be built in the purchase price like it always has been, I have not had one person say, nah, I don't want to pay it. They'll say, oh, okay, that makes sense. And both have agreed to pay the 6%.
Yeah, because all they've heard on the news is I don't have to pay real estate fees anymore. That's all they've heard, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Like we're all going to work for free. So
yeah. So that's how I've combated it.
Perfect. That's a great way to do that. Hey, Tony, you had a question. Do you want to jump on and ask that?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we all know that if all this comes through in July, that whatever you have on the buyer's agency agreement, like some of us knew that the seller would pay a full commission. So you put 0 on the buyer's agency commission. Well, now we're restricted that all the money, what the seller will pay is restricted to what we put on the buyer's agency agreement. So if you're putting 0,
Yes.
1, 2, whatever it may be, that's what you're bound by, the agreement that you made on the buyer's agency agreement. That's just
right.
really important.
So I was in a class with.
The other thing is there's several people here from different companies, and we need everybody to know right up front that we're not setting commissions. This is all negotiable.
Of course.
I was in the class with Seth Wiseman, who works with the Georgia Association of Realtors to write our forms. And so, you know, if you have 2.5% or 2.5% or whatever it is on the buyer's brokerage, 2.5 chickens on the buyer's brokerage, and they're going to give you 3 chickens, you can only take 2.5 unless you have a conversation with that buyer and the buyer agrees to adjust it. So you do need to take all that into consideration up front. And that is also going to apply, you know, how a lot of new construction might offer bonuses. Mm-hmm. That will apply on that as well. So if it is not on there, you have to have them add it, which could then bring up, well, why should you get it and why shouldn't I get it? Or let's split it, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So you need to think about all that up front.
That is going to be a good question on how that shakes out. Is there going to be a range play up to so-and-so? I don't know. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Well, unfortunately, in that instance with the builder, look, I understand exactly how it is, but it's like, I can't just write you a check. I mean, I can, but I'm not doing that. You know, and that's the thing that's the conversation about new construction, at least production builders, they're giving that money away. Your construction costs and your incentives don't change whether I'm here or not. Your experience will. That's why you need me here.
Yeah.
And this is an incentive for me.
Yep.
You know, maybe I'll buy a nice dinner as a gift at closing or something like that. But yeah.
Very cool. So somebody else asked, and actually this is something that we tried as an industry years ago. Has anyone considered a fee for service rather than a percentage? What are your thoughts on that?
I'll answer this a little differently. One thing I've seen some conversation around, and my real estate coach has suggested to me on the listing side of things, listing ranges. So if you want to list at 4.5%, here are the services that you get. It's like an a la carte type deal. If you want full fee real estate, you get 3 open houses in the first 4 weeks. You get access to this, you get professional, and you create essentially a menu of what the seller gets to choose from. I mean, oftentimes the people that don't want to pay are the people that say, I don't need, I don't need, I don't need.
Right.
And it gives you a bit of control as an agent. They're agreeing to the term that, you know, and maybe it's like 4.5%, 5%, or 6%. But those are things that I've seen. And look, I have a hard time with that just because I'm an effort guy. Like that's how I built my life, is like really hard work and showing up every day. So the idea of giving somebody less because they think they don't need it or they choose it, I don't love that. But that's something I've seen more and more of. And I have a feeling that's a direction that the listing side of this, like, oh, do you want to pay a buyer's brokerage? No, I don't. So now you're at 3.5% or this or that. Like, I think some of that stuff is definitely going to become more and more common.
You know, that is a good point because years ago we had the menu of services come out where you just select what you want, right? Then I've seen some people doing 3 options, the silver, gold, and platinum package, right? The silver is the basic listing, and then we have the gold, which is better, and the platinum, which offers all this extra stuff. You list it out, and you have them choose. And sometimes if you say, list with me or don't list with me, versus, hey, these are the 3 options, which one would you like? It's that it goes back to that, I'll choose option B, that kind of thing. So that could be something we see.
And what you do is you do.
Yeah,
You
nice.
have that, Tracy?
How's that working for you, Tracy?
Yeah, I would love to learn about it.
It's worked great for me in the past. People, it's really funny though, because when I say, okay, well, that's fine, let's look at what services that'll include. And they're like, but I want that. I'm like, well, then that costs money.
Costs money, that's right.
You know, so when you lay it out that way and what you're going to get versus what you don't, people have always gone with the full commission.
Yeah. They always pay the full commission, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they want it all.
I would love to see that. I've heard the same thing. My coach says the same thing. And everybody looks at what they don't get at the discount side and they're like, forget it. I'll just pay the full fee.
Yeah. And so sometimes I've seen where people will list out charges and costs and doing all this stuff, and it's a big number. And they say, but I can do for a regular commission and I take the risk. I'll do all of this and it's less than adding it up individually.
And can share, Tracy, would you mind sharing that with us?
Not at all.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, if you want to either put it up in the chat so people can download it, or we can get it to our Grow Global team and they can upload it into the resources page. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I got to put my hands on it now because it's in my notebook. I got to find the PDF.
Right. So what other questions do you guys have about what are people talking about? How are they working in this new area going forward? Anybody else have a question?
What's the open house world like?
Good question.
Does anybody know? Yeah. Or sign calls.
Open houses since this come out, and what questions are you getting?
What I've heard is what they talked about in Nashville at the regional rally for EXP just was simply that you have to announce it's a sign call in an open houses that I am the representative for the seller, and if you would like representation from me, you need to sign this doc. You're welcome to see this home, but if you want to pursue anything else, there will be representation that you'll need to sign. Is that correct? Does anyone know?
I think I had heard that you don't have to have them sign anything to look at the open house. They can just come in and look. So like you say,
not at the open house, but anything other than the open house.
Well, and that would make sense. If they're at the open house just roaming around, until they start asking a lot of questions, you're fine with that. But once they start asking questions, it gets into a different realm. That's where's the line, right? And then if they want to move to another house, that's where you have to get something signed. For that point, you now take them on as a client.
Here in the DMV, we have a notice right on the door when they enter that we represent the seller. And so they know coming in the door who we represent And if they want to go further, then there's going to be paperwork. But that's posted up upon entry
That's
into
in
the property.
Maryland.
That's Maryland? Okay. Always got the boss with me to make
Yeah,
sure I'm
right,
on
right, right.
point.
But that makes sense, though. I mean, somebody could come in and see, but once they start conversations, that gets into where we need to get something signed to protect us and them. Yep. Okay. What other questions anybody might have?
I have one thing I've been thinking about a lot is because I do a lot of first-time home buyer consultations, and they may not buy in 6 months or even a year sometimes, but I find that there is so much paperwork and so much to already educate them about in that process that I'm really looking for a script that is going to simplify how this all goes down, because even I always have explained how we get paid, which they would kind of brush over because of course they heard seller pays. And then, I guess I'm looking for a simplified way. If anybody comes across it, I'd appreciate it, of really explaining like how we get paid, not a bunch, I guess not the back and forth, because I feel like especially young buyers are going to they're seeing the same thing. We don't have to pay a buyer's agent, or we have to pay a buyer's agent, but then their parents who've bought in the past never did. So I'm running into them saying, now, what is all this? Because their parents have told them. And then when I start going into it, I just like their eyes glaze over and they're overwhelmed. So
Right, right.
I think I'm trying to find a simplified way, along with all the other paperwork that I usually try to go through the purchase agreement and how this all works and what the steps are. And then now I have to add in, well, if a seller doesn't pay us, then I'm going to ask you to pay. And it's just, I don't know. I guess that's my concern. Like, they want to see houses, they want to talk about houses. And then I feel like we're inundating them again with even more now. So
Luana, I think I I look, I get it. It's like one more layer here, right? You got to talk about pre-approval. You got to talk about finding lenders. You got to talk about what are you looking for in houses and things like that. And I really think just look, it's just one more step. And I know sometimes it feels like that's just one more step. But if you go back to 2020 and part of 2021, the one more step was the COVID document that you had to sign and the expectation of things with that. And then when rates were all over the place, if you brought a buyer in a house they were pre-approved for one day, they may not be approved at it the next just because of what rates were. So I would go with the idea of, look, you could break it down into a 10-minute conversation or 5 minutes to just say, look, in the past, what you paid for the property, the seller paid me a net amount based on the money that you gave them at closing. And now they may do that still, and that's what our hope is, and that's what I'm going to do. But the seller does not have to do that. In the instance they do not do that, the worst case scenario that's going to happen, you need to be willing to do this. And then they'll ask, because that will get their attention. Oh, wait, so I may have to pay you? In the worst case scenario, yes. But I'm going to be calling before we walk in the door on these properties to find out if compensation is provided for buyer representation. Would you like me to hold back properties that do not have buyer representation covered in them? And then we don't even have to go look at them. No, I'd actually still like to go look at them, and we could talk about it each time we go look at it. And I know, look, it's just that one step of education, and it just becomes another layer, just like you talk about an inspection term and appraisal gap coverage, anything like that. This is just another layer of a negotiation. And Luana, what I would tell you in any agent out there, we're going to be littered with what I like to call business decisions. If your fee is 3% and you have multiple offers, and the seller says, I'll pay 2%, and the buyer can't cover the gap, what are you going to do? And look, there's no right or wrong answer for anybody. Somebody may say they'll pay it. Somebody may say they'll waive the fee for the client. Somebody may say, oh, they're listing their property, I'll do it for less. And those are the decisions that you get to make as an entrepreneur that we all are. And that's how I would handle this. Just add the layer, slow down and go through it, and just help them understand as you go. Like, you're an awesome agent. You've done this for a long time, and I know you from our market. Like, you'll do great with this, and everybody will gladly pay you because the reputation you have, the stories that you tell, the business that you've done, they need you as an alliance, and you won't be considered an expense.
I know what I've been advising agents when they ask that question is when you're talking to them with the buyer agency agreement and explaining it, one of the things you can say is this agreement makes us partners now. And when we go see a house, they may offer compensation to cover this fee so you don't have to, or we may have to negotiate it in. And because we're partners, I'll make sure we negotiate it into the deal. Or you may have to pay that, right? But we will upfront know that when we make an offer on the property. So we're now business partners to make sure you come out with the best way forward. So that's just like Alex was saying, communicating that with them on what's going on with each property, and to tell them upfront which scenarios we may have, right? So somebody asked, do we have to start these documents now if we are already engaged with a buyer, or is this something that's coming up in July? So it's mandated in July. We have to by July. I would suggest go ahead and starting it now so that you can go ahead and get used to it, get your language down and all that kind of stuff. Some sellers or some selling agents are already working it right now that you're going to have to deal with this anyway. So I would suggest go ahead and starting it right now. Does anybody else have any comments on that?
Yeah, I would. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Might as well start it now. Let's practice it up now so that come July, you're not out of business because you can't do any business because you don't know what to tell people.
Yeah, I would also do it. I have a colleague of mine. He's a good friend. I talked to him recently, and 3 times already he's taken buyers through properties, and the commission's 2.5% on a $500,000 house, and he's written in any additional buyer representation fees or whatever the language is to be covered by the seller. And that was the difference of a 0.5 point plus a transaction fee. And every time the seller agreed to that. And so if you look at that instance alone, and this was announced, call it a month ago, that's over $10,000 of fees that he's put into that by having that documentation signed. And it's because his document says 3% plus transaction fee. And so instead of just taking the fee that the buyer now typically would do, you get a lot of control back to say, and look, he didn't have to do that. He didn't choose to do it. And if it was going to wedge the deal, he could have said no. But that's $10,000 that he went in there and negotiated for himself. Kudos to him. That's earned money. That's all. I think that's awesome. And that's because he had the document signed.
Well, and this goes along with Melinda's question she just asked is, I'm curious to know when we are writing it in, can we just write in any bonuses with new construction to be included? So that's it. Can you say buyer agent compensation to be 3% plus any new builder's bonus? Because I'm assuming we're gonna have to do that for the transaction fees as well. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Have any of y'all running across that yet?
Our state attorney said that has not been determined yet, that's still being discussed and in process as to how that's going to be done, because they're thinking there's going to have to be dollar limits or percentage limits on it.
See, I would think being a contract, this is just me talking off the top of my head as a longtime broker, if it's written into the agreement, then that's what legally could happen, right? Otherwise, they're going to have to come out with specific limitations and stuff in some sort of agreement. So that's going to be interesting. So we'll have to follow that.
Don't you think, Rob? Look, all these rules right now, they basically thrown to us and said, "Hey, you guys go figure them out."
We'll figure it out.
We keep asking the question, like, what's the lender law going to do, and can they roll it into a mortgage, or can they do this? And the reality is like, I mean, think about the people who are going to suffer the most pain from this. It's like a VA buyer, like what regulation there? We don't know. What regulation around FHA? We're trying to figure it out. And that's all we can tell people. But the reality is
buyers are going to get hit. Yeah.
those are government loans. And so for them to get involved and put this in front of it, they got to do something. And
Right.
unfortunately, July is like closing in on us, and they'll do that and it'll happen, it'll work. But the reality is like stuff's going to keep coming out and stuff's going to keep changing. That's the reality of it.
Well, now they're playing fix it. They're playing catch up, right?
Yep.
They created this, and now they got to say, oh, well, that caused that problem. Oh, that caused that problem. So now we're going to deal with FHA and government loans and VA and all that kind of stuff. So right now it's unsure, but that's all going to have to shake out, because this is going to cause major issues down the road. That's for sure.
Do you guys think this is all going to shake out before July, like anticipated? Or, I mean, because it seems like an awful short period of time for all of that to change and for us to be abreast of all the new situations. I mean, especially the government loans, like a VA buyer, which should be, you know, one of our most respected buyers, is now not able to do anything at this point because of the law, unless the seller is paying. So I don't know. It just seems like a very short time to come up with all these changes and then reiterate them to us so we can apply them.
Well, we all know how fast the government works. So
Right.
I don't know. They should jump on this right away, because I'm guessing they're going to get a big backlash, but we don't know. So in the normal world, we're going to, as agents, we should have a lot of things shake out and work through, and we'll have our systems in place by July. Government wise, finance wise, not sure how that's going to play out. But if we do our part and negotiate it into the deal, because it's a VA deal or a FHA deal or whatever, then we can still take care of their needs. We just got to be cognizant of that as we're going through the deal. So
Rob,
that's a great topic. Any last minute questions before we close this out?
Yes, Rob. Can Alex or someone explain about writing in the transaction fee?
Good question.
Yeah, so our contract just has a section that says what the fee is, and it has like a blank and then a percentage, and we just write in 3% plus $350, and we just write it in there.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
So if you want to save the chat and some of the information in the chat, you can click on the chat box, go down to the bottom where it has the three little dots and says more, and click save chat. That will save this chat onto your computer, and you can go back and revisit some of those that information. Also, if we had talked about it on here, I think Tracy's going to send us some stuff as well. We're going to get it uploaded to Grow Global site so you can have it as a resource there. So next week, Julie, can you pop on and tell us who we have coming on next week? Next Monday at our Monday Mastermind.
Yes, next Mastermind Monday on the 22nd, we have CMA Masterclass, a deep dive into comparative market analysis. And we have some panels who will talk about it. Yeah, that will be on the 22nd at 12 noon EST.
That's been a topic we've had a number of people ask about in the CMA. What are they doing to make their CMA robust and stand out and get the clients to understand, so to get the listing. So that's going to be a great class. So we'll see everybody next Monday at 12 noon Eastern time for the CMA Masterclass. Thank you guys. Appreciate everything and everybody's help. And we'll see you guys next week.